Hi, it's Bruce here. This video should act as a companion to my recent video on how to apply dry transfer lettering to your model. In that video I talked about people's fears that the letters did not adhere all that well and would be lifting off with handling and use and so forth. Excuse me, and I talked in that video about the solution to that, which basically is to apply 2 thin coats of a water-based clear flat finish on top of your lettering. I'm once again working on a model that I wanted to use dry transfer lettering on. In this case it's the build of a coal tipple for my Pennsylvania area logging railroad, but back then the logging railroads often also served a local coal mine or other industry. And so I wanted to have a couple of small coal tipples on my layout. And if you're not a model railroader or not into modeling older time periods, a coal tipple is just a structure that a mine, whether it be a coal mine or one of the other hard ore mines, would build to transfer their product into railroad cars. So it's basically a building up on a wood platform tall enough that the cars could run underneath and the coal could be dropped inside. And in trying to decide on a name for my coal tipple, I had a couple of choices. Actually, my railroad, the Slate Run Railroad, did exist, and it was located in Lycoming County, Pennsylvania. And there were 2 working coal mines which were operating in Lycoming County at the same time as the Slate Run. And I could have chosen one of those names, but I chose Lycoming Coal as the name to help viewers get a sense of location. We always try to give people ideas of, are you looking at the Northeast? Are you looking at the Mid-Atlantic states? Are you looking at the Northwest? Where are you geographically? So by naming it Lycoming Coal, kind of says, hey, you're in the middle of Pennsylvania someplace. The other 2 coal companies that actually existed were the McIntyre Coal Company and the Red Run Coal Company. I might use one of those on a second tipple that I plan on building, but I did want to go with one that helped establish location. And I used my dry transfer letters to come up with the name. This is actually part of one of the front walls of the coal tipple. And you can see I have it fairly well centered. And what I want to do in this video rather quickly is just convince you that those letters are really down there, but give you some tips on how to distress and weather these letters, because this is a coal tipple, which means lots of coal dust, and any sign that was painted on this building in white paint was not going to look like bright white paint very long. The tools for distressing these letters really are a single edge razor blade and a number 11 blade in a hobby knife and brass wire brush. You can buy one that's shaped like a toothbrush. I happen to have some bore cleaning brushes that laying around that would suffice, and that's what I'm going to use here. Now this is one of those applications because I'm going to be, amongst other things, cutting through some of these letters down through the spaces between the wood slats on the front of this building. This is a time to use a very sharp razor blade and a very sharp number 11 blade. So went to my stash of razor blades and I'm taking out a new one. And I think you can see one of the things that I do when I open up a new razor blade is I take a little bit of masking tape, fold it over the top, and I put down the date that I've opened this blade. And the reason I do that is at the end of a modeling period, whether it's a couple weeks or a couple months, I'll have half a dozen razor blades laying around, and I'll be playing, which one is the newest, which is the oldest, which ones could be dull. And by putting this little tag on it, I know the date that I opened it up. I also put a new blade in my hobby knife. And no matter how sharp these blades are, razor blades tend to be thinner. So if I'm going to make a slice through the letters, I'll make the initial slice with the razor blade and then come back with the number 11 to widen it up a little bit. And just to mention, I found another source for number 11 blades that are made in the good old USA, and that's Techna Edge, as you can see here. And again, for those of us who are frustrated with how quickly Chinese blades dull and chip, here's another source of a decent number 11 blade. If you look at the opening picture on my other video on dry transfers, you see a fence that I lettered for Tyler's Tires. Now those fence slats had, in some cases, a scale 1 to 2 inches between the slats. And clearly, if these are supposed to be painted letters, paint is not going to adhere to the space between two slats. So in that case, once I put the letters on, it was absolutely essential to cut the letters out where they were spanning a air gap. In this case, the strip wood is close enough together that a person using a paintbrush to paint this sign on the building could get into the cracks and it would look like there was no space. But I did want to just show you the technique for cutting down through a space. And if you look at the letter A here, there is a gap here that's a little bit larger than the rest. And so I'm going to take a slice down from the top to the bottom, right through that A. And the second pass. And then I'll come back with my number 11 blade just to widen that gap up a little bit. And you might not be able to see it, but I can. Now there's a gap in that lettering caused by the cuts. And if it was on a fence, you'd want to come down along one slat and the other slat and get rid of that color of the piece of the letter that's in between. Now you can see from what I just did that that letter did not lift up when I started to cut it. And this next thing will prove that point even more. Again, going back to the Tyler's Tires, which I really wanted to make look like it had been out in the weather for a long time, I ended up pretty aggressively rubbing on the letters. You have to get through the coating of the clear finish you put on. And I started to remove little bits of the lettering. That's not my goal here. My goal here is to show you the technique, but beyond that, I just want to roughen up that smooth finish from the clear finish I put on there, the sealant, so that it will hold my chalks in the final step a little bit better. So again, going with the wood, now normally my hand would be on the bottom side of this, but I don't want to cover up what I'm doing. Just start, not too much pressure here, I'm just lightly going with the grain over that lettering. And if this doesn't convince you that those letters are down there very securely, I don't know what will. So again, if you wanted to distress it enough like I did on Tyler's Tires to start showing some of the lettering missing, you can do that. You press harder and just keep rubbing. But there, this is accomplishing what I want to do here. Okay, so the last step, the final step, now to tone down those letters so they look more weathered, is to go over it with some chalks. And in this case, I'm going with, let's see if I can, probably should back out a little bit here. Okay, Weber Costello Alpha Color pastels. And this is a box of 48 sticks that I've had forever. And you can see that it's got just about every color of the rainbow in it. But again, what I want to do is go over this, and my only other tool, by the way, is once again a fairly stiff, cheap brush here. I want to go over it with a color that's very close to the background color, so one of the browns. And I'm going to go with, get this in the light here, this particular brown right here. And so you just rub on it and get some chalks on your brush, and again start drawing it down over your lettering in the direction of your grain. And you should be able to already start to see that you are getting that bright white look out of to disappear. I'm going to go over some of the others too, so that when somebody's looking at this, they don't say, why is the background different over the letter than it is in the rest of the wood siding there. Again, all this is going to do is take that bright white look to the letters and tone it down, using that technique that I mentioned before that Mike Tylich passed on, which is to use a colored chalk for this process that's close to what the background color is. And what I will do in a second when I'm done brushing this on is make a final pass across the surface with your friend and mine, the sponge applicator for mascara, and again trying to go with the grain, taking off the excess, smoothing it out. And there you go, some tips on distressing and weathering dry transfer letterings, and at the same time driving home the fact that those letters are securely in place. And you can see that they're spaced at least what looks great to your eye and straight, using that graph paper technique that we discussed in the previous video. And there you go. That's it for this session.